In the 28th of April 2026, the US Treasury added 35 Iranian entities to the sanctions list under a press release titled Economic Fury. If you read the release carefully, and I did, because apparently this is what I do on Tuesday nights now, there is a paragraph describing how Iran is moving oil revenue. The paragraph describes a debt-clearing protocol routed through a network of trusted brokers, settled in commodity-backed obligations with no physical transfer of currency. That paragraph could be lifted word for word from a Cairo Geniza document dated 1141. The Treasury thinks they found a new threat. They found an 8th century Indian Ocean trade protocol, and it is currently winning. The system is called Hawala. In Hindi and Urdu it's hundi. In medieval Arabic, suftaja. The Western press has been calling it exotic and shadowy for the last 6 weeks. It is neither. It is older than the Bank of England by 900 years. It financed the British conquest of India. It quietly ran $40 billion of Soviet-Indian trade for 40 years, while the IMF pretended that trade did not exist. And right now, today, May 2026, it is the load-bearing infrastructure of every sanctions evasion route on Earth. I want to do something specific tonight. I want to walk through 5 moments in 1200 years where the dominant empire of the day looked at this system, decided to kill it, and failed. 5 times, 5 empires, same protocol, same outcome. By the end, you will understand why every DeFi protocol on the internet is, knowingly or otherwise, reinventing what a Malabar merchant wrote on a palm leaf in the 8th century. We're going in order. They get worse as we go. Number 5 is happening on your phone right now. Item 1. Abbasid Baghdad, 8th century. The Cairo Geniza. Document TS Arabic 30.184. Picture the trade route. Baghdad is the capital of an empire that runs from Spain to the Hindu Kush. The wealth flowing into it comes from the Indian Ocean. Pepper, indigo, textiles, iron, offloaded at Basra by ships that have come from the Malabar coast in southwest India. The merchants doing this trade have a problem, and the problem is metal, specifically gold and silver. They need to settle accounts across 2,000 miles of pirate-infested water, with merchants they may have never personally met, in a world where transferring physical coin means transferring physical risk. So they don't transfer the coin, they transfer the obligation. A merchant in Qeshm writes an instruction. Pay the bearer 400 dinars, settle against my next consignment of cardamom. Hands it to a courier, the courier walks it to Basra. A counter merchant in Basra honours the instruction. The cardamom arrives 6 months later, and the book's clear. No metal moved. The whole thing runs on trust, on family networks, and on the absolute certainty that if you Welsh on a hundi, your name is finished from Aden to Guangzhou. The Sanskrit name for the document is hundi. The Arabic name for the same instrument is suftaja. The mechanism is identical, and the receipts, and this is the part that makes my jaw drop, the receipts are still in the Cairo Geniza. Quick aside on the Geniza, because it matters. A Geniza is a Hebrew word for a storage room in a synagogue, where you put any document containing the name of God, because you are not allowed to throw such documents away. The Cairo Geniza, in the Ben Ezra synagogue, was used continuously from the 9th century to the 19th. It was opened in the 1890s. It contained roughly 400,000 documents. Among those documents are the everyday business letters of medieval Mediterranean merchants, and a non-trivial fraction of those letters are hundi. We have the actual paperwork. Solomon Schechter brought it to Cambridge. It is today in the University Library, classification mark TS. You can look it up. You can look at the photographs. The instructions are formulaic. The phrasing is, I want you to hold this. The phrasing is structurally identical to the phrasing in the Treasury's April 28th press release. Same mechanism, same protocol, 1100 years apart. So that's Exhibit 1. The system exists. It is documented. It is running global trade between the Mediterranean and the Malabar coast in 1141. The first empire to find it inconvenient hasn't shown up yet. That comes next. Item 2. Murshidabad, 1757, Robert Clive, the East, India Company and the Jagat Seth Banking House. Right. So by the 1700s, the hundi network has had 1,000 years to mature, and in Mughal India it has produced the largest private banking house on earth, the Jagat Seths. The name is a title, not a surname. Jagat Seth means banker of the world, and the family that holds it is, by 1750, sitting on a discount and remittance network that runs from Kabul to Madras. They issue hundi. They clear hundi. They settle the tax revenues of the Mughal Empire. They are, in modern terms, the Federal Reserve of South Asia, and they are private. The British East India Company, which by this point is a chartered trading company with delusions of statehood, needs Indian rupees to pay Indian troops, and the only people who can move that volume of rupees are the Jagat Seths. So when Robert Clive decides to overthrow the Nawab of Bengal at the Battle of Plassey on the 23rd of June, 1757, the campaign is financed, and I cannot stress this enough, financed by hundi. Clive's troops are paid in rupees that are remitted from Madras to Murshidabad through the Jagat Seth network. The conquest of Bengal is paid for using the very banking system the British will spend the next 200 years trying to dismantle. There is a documentary record of this. The National Archives of India, Persian Records section, has the hundi receipts. The Bengal Public Consultations volumes at the British Library have Clive's correspondence about needing the Seth's paper to fund the troops. The Seths take a 1.5% commission. They are entirely professional about it. And then, and you can see this coming, Clive wins, the East India Company takes Bengal, and within 15 years the company has issued the 1773 circular of the Bengal Council, which orders company merchants to use company-issued bills of exchange in preference to the native hundi system, which is irregular, untraceable, and detrimental to the orderly conduct of commerce. Untraceable here means the British couldn't tax it. Detrimental means it didn't go through Calcutta. They had just used the system to conquer the country, the same year they tried to outlaw it. It didn't work. That's the part that gets glossed over in the colonial histories. They issued the circular, they issued more circulars, they created the presidency banks. They drove the Jagat Seths into bankruptcy by 1800. That part they did succeed at, and it is genuinely tragic. But the underlying network, the village level, family level, merchant level hundi network, they could not touch. Because the network wasn't a building. It wasn't an institution you could nationalize. It was a protocol, distributed, trust-based, ledgered in the heads of 2,000 brokers across the subcontinent. You can't dismantle a protocol by passing a circular. You can only ban its paperwork. The brokers stopped writing hundi at the top of the page and wrote something else. The system kept running. It kept running through the 1857 rebellion. It kept running through partition. It kept running through the Banking Companies Act of 1949, which formalised the British attempt and which the independent Indian state inherited and dutifully maintained. It is running tonight. That's 2 empires down. The third one is the one nobody tells you about, and it's my favourite because the empire involved is, well, let me get to it. Item 3. New Delhi and Moscow. 1953 to 1991. $40 billion of trade the IMF could not see. Here is something almost no Western finance textbook mentions, and the reason it doesn't mention it is because acknowledging it would require rewriting the entire Bretton Woods narrative. From 1953 onwards, India and the Soviet Union ran a bilateral trade system, denominated in non-convertible Indian rupees. India shipped tea, jute, leather goods, pharmaceuticals, eventually heavy machinery. The Soviets shipped oil, steel, weapons, industrial plant. Neither side used dollars, neither side used gold, neither side used the IMF's accounting framework. The trade was settled, and you'll like this, through a debt-clearing mechanism run out of the Reserve Bank of India and Veneshtorg Bank in Moscow, where the obligations accumulated as ledger entries and were periodically netted against each other. If you opened any RBI annual report between 1955 and 1991, there is a section titled Rupee Trade with the running totals. It got to $40 billion by the late 80s. 40 billion. Cleared without dollars, without gold, without IMF involvement. The IMF could not price this. That sounds like a small technical complaint, but it is genuinely the point. The whole architecture of Bretton Woods rests on the fiction that international trade is denominated ultimately in dollars, and that any deviation is either a workaround or an anomaly. India-USSR rupee trade was neither. It was a parallel system, larger than the GDP of most member states, running for 38 years, in plain sight, in published RBI annual reports, and the IMF's official position was that it was non-standard. Non-standard meaning they had no model for it, meaning it didn't exist in their books. I want to flag the technical nuance here, because someone in the comments is going to call this out, and they should. The India USSR system is not strictly Hawala. It's a state-level bilateral clearing arrangement, not a private merchant network. The mechanism, though, the underlying debt clearing logic, the netting against future trade, the avoidance of physical metal transfer, the trust anchored in a long-running counterparty relationship. That mechanism is the same mechanism the Malabar merchants used in 1141. The institutional wrapper changed, the protocol did not. Bretton Woods, the structural villain of this section, treated parallel clearing as a temporary inconvenience that would dissolve once everyone joined the dollar system. $40 billion of receipt says otherwise. The system collapsed in 1991, not because the architecture failed, but because one of the two counterparties did. The Soviet Union ended. The clearing protocol ended with it. And then, and we'll come back to this, the protocol came right back, with different counterparties, the moment the next sanctions regime appeared. Right. So, three empires have looked at this thing and tried to box it in. The British couldn't. Bretton Woods couldn't. The fourth attempt is happening as we speak. Item 4. Tehran, Dubai, Qeshm Island. April 28, 2026. The Office of Foreign Assets Control. 2.5 weeks ago, OFAC added 35 entities to the SDN list under designation FR-DOC-2026-08741. The lead entity is a company called Farab Soroush Afar Qeshm, registered on Qeshm Island in the Strait of Hormuz. The Treasury press release describes the network as follows. It says the network operates a system in which Iranian oil is sold for yuan to Chinese counterparties. The yuan is held in escrow at named UAE-based brokers. The obligation against that yuan is then transferred. And I'm reading directly from the press release here, paraphrased. Transferred via a series of trusted intermediaries known locally as rahbar, who maintain bilateral ledgers and net obligations periodically, settling in gold or commodity flows when imbalances exceed agreed thresholds. End of paraphrase. I'm going to read that again in 12th century language. The merchant of Cochin assigns to the merchant of Aden the obligation of 400 dinars, recorded in the ledger of the broker at Hormuz, settled at the next consignment of pepper, gold reckoned only when imbalance compels it. Same sentence, different decade. The rahbar is a hawaladar. The Persian word for the role is different from the Arabic word. Rahbar literally means one who shows the way, but the function is identical. The Qeshm Island networks are the contemporary descendants of the Strait of Hormuz brokers, who have been doing this since the Abbasid era. Qeshm has been a clearing node for Indian Ocean trade since the 8th century. It is currently a clearing node for Iranian oil. The geography has not moved. The protocol has not changed. The only thing that's changed is that OFAC has decided to put it on a press release, and here is the bit that I genuinely cannot get past. The Treasury is treating this as a novel financial engineering threat. Their counter-strategy is to designate individual entities, freeze named accounts, pressure correspondent banks, and disrupt the dollar clearing choke points. That strategy works against a centralized institution. Hawala does not have a centralized institution. There is no Federal Reserve of Hawala you can sanction. The 1773 East India Company circular failed for exactly this reason. The 1949 Banking Companies Act failed for exactly this reason. And the April 28, 2026 OFAC designation will fail for exactly this. Reason? You can take down Farab Soroush Afar Qeshm. There are 40 more brokers on Qeshm. The protocol does not require any specific broker. I want to be careful here, because I am not, contra what some commenters will assume, defending sanctions evasion or Iranian oil revenue or any specific geopolitical outcome. I am describing a technical fact about a protocol. The technical fact is that the protocol has, by my count, survived the British East India Company, the Bretton Woods architecture, the Banking Companies Act, and is currently in the process of surviving OFAC. The British took 200 years to fail. The US sanctions regime is on month 18. That brings us to the last one, the one happening right now, the one that if you take only one thing away from this video, you should take this. Item 5. The post-dollar architecture, or every barter agreement signed since 2021, Sri Lanka, summer 2021. Cash-strapped, fuel-strapped, in the early stages of the financial collapse that would topple the government a year later. The Sri Lankan government cuts a deal with Iran. Sri Lanka gets fuel oil. Iran gets Ceylon tea, roughly $250 million of equivalent value. settled through tea shipments, no dollars involved, no swift message sent. The press at the time treats it as a curiosity. It is not a curiosity, it is a hundi. It is precisely the mechanism the Jagat Seths used in 1750. Tea moves north, oil moves south, ledger nets to zero. Pakistan signs a similar barter agreement with Iran in 2023, fruit, rice, textiles, against fuel and petrochemicals. India and Russia post-2022 settle the bulk of their bilateral trade in rupees and rubles, with quarterly net imbalances cleared, when they have to be cleared, in gold. China and Russia the same, Brazil and China increasingly the same. This is not a workaround. I think this is the part that most Western financial commentary has wrong, and it has it wrong because it cannot quite admit it. A workaround is a temporary measure that dissolves when the obstacle is removed. This is not dissolving, it is propagating. Every new sanctions designation produces 3 new bilateral barter arrangements. Every new bilateral barter arrangement strengthens the protocol. The protocol is, I want to put this carefully, the protocol is what international trade looks like when you remove the assumption that there must be a single global reserve currency. It is what trade looked like before Bretton Woods. It is what trade looked like for the 800 years between Baghdad and London. It is what trade is, by default, when no single empire is in a position to enforce its currency on everyone else. And this is the HRA, the modern technology tie, the bit I promised you in the cold open. Every DeFi protocol on the internet is reinventing this. Atomic swaps, cross-chain bridges, liquidity pool netting, decentralized stablecoins backed by commodity baskets. The mechanism is, structurally, Hawala. A debt obligation in one ledger is netted against a counter-obligation in another ledger, settled at agreed intervals, with collateral posted only when imbalances exceed thresholds. The whole vocabulary of modern decentralized finance, bridge, liquidity, netting, settlement, describes operations the Malabar coast merchants were performing in the 8th century with palm leaves and a trust network. We did not invent decentralized finance in 2009 with Bitcoin. We rediscovered a 1,200-year-old Indian ocean trade protocol and gave it a JavaScript implementation. The protocol was always there, the implementation got cheaper. So, 5 empires, 1,200 years, the Abbasid bureaucracy did not kill it. Robert Clive did not kill it. He used it, then tried to ban it, and he failed. Bretton Woods did not kill it. It ran $40 billion of trade through a hole Bretton Woods could not see. OFAC is not killing it. OFAC is, at the moment, designating individual nodes of a protocol that does not have nodes. And the post-dollar barter architecture is, increasingly, where the trade actually clears. 5 for 5. The pattern is not a coincidence. The pattern is the system, and the system is not a workaround for the dollar. It is what trade looks like when the dollar steps off the table. The last thing I want to say is the quiet thing, because the fury at the colonial dismantling, and I do feel that fury, I feel it about the Jagat Seths driven into bankruptcy in 1800. I feel it about every village-level hundi broker who was told their 300-year-old family ledger was irregular and untraceable. The fury is real. But the deeper feeling, the one that lands at minute 23 on a Tuesday night when I'm reading a Treasury press release, is something quieter. It is the feeling that the people who built this system on the Malabar coast in the 8th century understood something that the architects of Bretton Woods did not. They understood that money is not a thing. Money is a record of obligation between people who trust each other. If you build the trust, you don't need the metal. If you build the network, you don't need the institution. The Indian Ocean merchants knew that in 750. The British forgot it in 1773. We are, slowly, in the most expensive way possible, remembering it. Next time, we go to Cambridge, 1671. Henry Oldenburg, the Royal Society, opens a letter from a Jesuit. Till then, I'm Ronnie, mind your ledgers.